New developments now in this plan to bring a suspected ringleader, the deadly Benghazi terror attack, to justice. This man on screen on his way to the U.S. aboard a Navy ship, a slow ship that is. That Lindsey Graham says is just plain wrong.
This is really the most ill-conceived idea coming out of an administration that seems to have no limits on ill-conceived ideas. Instead of a slow boat to New York, you ought to be on a fast plane to Gitmo. Taking the guy to New York on a ship, and when you dock, you read him his rights, destroys the ability to gather intelligence. I never want this guy to hear you have the right to remain silent anytime soon. I want him to talk.
Jessie Jane Duff is a retired Marine Corps Gunnery Sergeant, member of the Concerned Veterans for America, and welcome back here, and good morning to you.
Thank you for inviting me.
You got a problem with him coming to Washington, D.C.? I mean, he's on this boat. They're going to get some good intel out of him, don't you think?
You know, what really surprises me is that we're affording Miranda rights that are afforded to our U.S. citizens, to jihadists. Those rights are established for Americans to follow the law and ensure that we are treated equally under the law and protected. But we're talking about a jihadist. We need to have a military tribunal. I agree with Lindsey Graham. He needs to be on a fast plane to Guantanamo so that we can have a military tribunal and be able to get some information from him before we even take him to trial. But Miranda rights...
But he could be on that boat for weeks. He could be on that boat for months. I mean, you got to think they're wringing good information out of him, do you not?
You're quite hopeful, Bill. I don't want to agree with that. It would be nice if I could have confidence in this administration, but terrorism has increased by 58% since 2010. We have done nothing to eradicate it. We're releasing Guantanamo detainees left and right, and I don't think that we have the capability to go after this the way we should strategically.
Well, have you thought about this? I mean, the president campaigned against these so-called black sites in Eastern Europe where some detainees were taken first. But this it's a black site at sea.
Well, I would like to be optimistic, and if that's the case, it would be extraordinary. The reality is, though, is that the administration claimed that al-Qaeda was on the run. That was part of their campaign slogan, that they were been decimated and they're on the run. With the 58% increase since 2010, I'd like to say that we need to come out and admit we still have a war on terror. We haven't even heard the White House use those words since they got into office, and I find that to be very insulting to the American public. It still exists. It's quite apparent by what we see going on in Iraq today.
Come back to Senator Graham, because the case he's making is that he says the president's fighting crime while he's trying to fight a war. What do you think of that?
Yes, I agree with Senator Graham, and I also agree with Senator McCain. He does need to go to Guantanamo. We would be able to have interrogation. I'm not talking torture. I think people are very naive when they think that we need to just get rid of Guantanamo. Guantanamo is the place that terrorists go. This is the place that we need to be able to ensure we get as much intelligence out of them as possible to save American lives.
But he wants to close it down. And you've got about the president. I mean, he has about 2 years and 4 or 5 months to do that.
It's quite obvious that's what his strategic plan is by the release of the 5 prisoners. We have to understand that the shoe bomber was the guy who planned the shoe bombing attack was a former Guantanamo detainee. One of the terrorists behind the Benghazi attack, Gitmo, was a former Guantanamo detainee. We've had multiple issues with Guantanamo former detainees. 31 of them are listed by name by the Pentagon. We are naive if we think terrorism is going to go away. It's increased, and ISIS is evidence of that.
Yeah, and on ISIS, as a veteran, how do you feel about when you see the gains they're making in Iraq and potentially in Afghanistan later? I mean, do you get a sense that we are going to lose in both countries ultimately?
Yeah, it's really devastating. I have a veteran on Twitter that has tweeted out, "I did not lose my arm in Baghdad to watch it fall, Mr. President." That is the reality of this. ISIS is Sunni-Shia war. I think people are getting this misunderstood. ISIS is a jihadist group that we do not want to have become an international attack group. The leader of this organization is basically like Osama bin Laden on steroids. Baghdadi has threatened the U.S. in 2012 and said, "I'll see you in New York."
Folks, you're right about that. Jessie Jane Duff out of Washington, thank you for coming back today.